Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Talking with Natasha. I'm so excited because today we are talking to Kirsten Ferguson. If she's not hyping you up on the tread as a Peloton instructor, she's an active mom of two. Well, life threw her a curveball when she started to experience hip pain, something that not only could sideline her livelihood, but her entire career. Even still, she pushed through, not only making a triumphant return to the tread, but actually crossing the finish line at the New York City Marathon. This is definitely a next level conversation. Kirsten Ferguson, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So how did you become a Peloton instructor?
Great question. So at the time, I was walking through the pandemic and I was teaching cycling probably for 2 years at that point. Then the pandemic hit and everything shut down. And so I remember just being at home like, wow, this is a really scary time. I wonder how my people are doing. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get on my Peloton bike. I had the house.
Yeah.
And I started teaching on Instagram Live.
Really?
Yeah, I just told all my people, hey, hop on your bike or your tread or just move around your space. Let's all just move together for an hour. And it started to pick up traction on Instagram. And out of nowhere, after 3 months of doing that, I got a DM from Peloton.
Really?
Yeah.
What did they say?
Hey, we like your content. We'd love for you to come in and audition. And so I'm thinking it was for the bike. So I'm like, yes, this is my moment. Like, I've manifested this.
Yeah.
And so
Because in terms of like levels, is the bike the best, or how does it work?
I want to say yes, the bike has been around the longest.
Okay.
So we added the tread later, so not as many people have the
Got it. So
tread
it's like more
as the
visibility
bike.
is with
Yes,
the bike.
for sure.
Yeah.
And that's what I knew. You know, I had the Peloton tread, but I was never a runner. So they auditioned me and they were like, we love you. We think you're great, but not for the bike. We don't have space on the bike for you. What do you think about the tread? And at that time, I was not a runner. I, have told myself all my life that I hated running.
Oh my gosh.
But it was such an opportunity for me to challenge myself in a different way. I was also walking through a divorce at the time, so really trying to figure out how am I going to provide for my family.
Right.
Let's just bet on yourself here and see. Like, there's a reason why this is happening for you. And so I auditioned for the tread, got the job, and then started training, and here I am 4 years later.
That is an incredible backstory.
Crazy.
What was the audition like? Like, what do they make you do?
So it was during the pandemic at the time. So my first initial auditions were all on video at home. So my audition on the bike was on my Peloton bike. I had the Peloton tread.
Yeah.
So you're setting up your phone camera and pretending like you're teaching at the Peloton studio.
And I'm sure they're gauging like your energy.
Your cueing, how you look on camera, things you're saying. They know it's not all perfect.
Right.
But, just making sure you're entertaining and kind of fitting what it is that they're looking for.
Yeah. And I've always wondered, like, how do you look so pretty while you're sweating and you're like running? You look so perfect.
Oh, gosh. It's a lot of trial and error with makeup and setting spray for sure. But yeah, so it was 4 auditions on like my cell phone camera.
Yeah.
And then months of interviews. And then they brought you in for an actual audition during the studio. But again, this is during the pandemic. So, it's masks on, everyone with gloves, like everything down to timing. You're doing COVID tests to make sure you're good for this audition.
Yeah.
And so you go in, and it was kind of surreal for me to walk into the studio that I've been, watching on my Peloton tread the whole time. And you walk in, and there's 10 cameras, and it's a whole different world for me. And you're just like, all right. They're like, the red light's going to go on. Follow the red light.
Oh my gosh. I'm getting chills right now.
Yeah,
because
it was wild. It was wild.
It's got to be like a full circle moment in a lot of ways.
Completely. And you're just like, you know what? I'm just going to go. I'm going to do it. It's not going to be perfect. I think they know that. But, I'm going to show who I am and what I'm capable of.
And you never thought about running before?
Never. I mean, I was an athlete growing up all the way up through, I played basketball from the 4th grade all the way up through high school. But even that, like I had asthma, so I would always get out of running the suicides or any way I can get out of running, I promise you I would. So yeah, running was never in the cards for me.
And now you are a tread instructor for Peloton.
Now I am a Peloton tread instructor. I teach walking, running, outdoor content. Yeah, it's wild.
It's amazing. And going through a divorce too. I mean, that had to be just such a tough time. Putting yourself out there, trying something new.
Yeah, it was definitely scary. But I also say that, Peloton really saved me because we were in such a dark, unknown time. And then to also be going through a divorce with 2 young kids, just trying to navigate that all. And it was an opportunity for me to switch my thinking, and challenge myself in a different way and really take myself out of, whatever dark place I was in and really put my focus on something beautiful and exciting and new. So I really say Peloton saved me in that way.
It's kind of like putting all your focus on something new that kind of redirects your energy.
Yes, absolutely.
Into something positive that's also nourishing you.
Yeah, absolutely. And challenging myself with running and learning a new craft and really studying running and even studying the Peloton instructors. There's so many different ones, and I knew they wanted me to be me, but I was just watching all my teammates and what they were doing and how they were saying and how they were programming classes. And so I had the opportunity to really learn a lot in that moment.
When people come to your class, what do you want them to take away?
The biggest thing I want them to take away is understanding that you can show up as your authentic self right where you're at. And, running is a journey. And I've learned that firsthand, and so I want a lot of people when they step into my class to see a version of themselves. We're all a beginner at one point, especially me coming to the tread, and to understand that's okay. And even if you don't really consider yourself a runner, why don't you try it? And I want people to come along on that journey with me. I also am very vulnerable in my classes. I share a lot of my personal stories in the hopes that it can touch someone that may be going through something similar, to see that somebody else is going through it too.
I find you to be so inspirational.
Thank you.
I mean, you talk about running being a journey, and I feel like you've been at the lowest of lows, and then you've been at the highest of highs.
Yeah.
When you talk about lows, I mean, let's talk about something that life threw you a curveball with some hip pain that you were experiencing. What was that like? Kind of walk me through what you were feeling.
That was a really scary time for me because I worked really hard to get to where I was as a Peloton instructor. I was 2 years in, finally feeling like I'm getting this running thing down. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to challenge myself. For the first time in my life, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go run a half marathon. And that was the first time I ever even said anything like that out loud. So I started training and I injured myself. I hurt my hip. And they were talking surgery. And there were so many fears of the unknown in that moment of, am I going to be able to run again? Am I going to be able to do my job? This is my career now. This is how I provide for my family.
It's not a hobby. This
is my livelihood. And so I'm talking to the doctors like, all right, well, how long is this going to take me out? I want to be able to get back. I want to be able to communicate how long this is going to take for me. What's the pain going to be like? As a single mom, I still have to show up, so it's like I need to figure out what my plan is there. So there was a lot of unknowns going through my head at that time. But I really aligned myself with like some really amazing doctors and PTs, and the support of Peloton was incredible. They just said, focus on getting back, and that's it. Like, go heal.
How long was that recovery process?
So I was off of the platform for 4 months.
Wow.
Not running for 6. So I was able to come back and teach walking.
Okay.
But,
that's still
so that was
great.
But it was the journey to get back and to trust my body and the process, because the issue with hip is you can feel great, but you have to give it time to fully heal. Otherwise you can re-injure it. And so I really had to focus on, following the doctor's orders and doing the PT exercises, even though they seem silly, and, just really following the plan and trusting the plan.
Yeah.
But it was also, as I look back on it, it was such a time that was so necessary for me. I had a lot of healing to do physically, but also emotionally and mentally, that I didn't have the opportunity to do, because unlike, I think a lot of us do this, is movement was a form of healing for me. And when he took that out, now I really had to address.
Because that was your therapy in a way.
It was my therapy for a long time, a long time. Even dealing with miscarriages and all of those things, like movement was my saving grace in all of that. And so you take now movement out, and now it's like, okay, now we're going to really sit and address the stuff that you've been
in your
pushing
feelings.
down. Yeah.
There had to be some dark times.
Oh, absolutely. There was moments where it was real. I have an amazing life coach who really helped me get through a lot of it. But it was interesting. The more studying I was doing on it, hip pain, they say it's fear of moving forward, and a lot of that fear was because of stuff that I just hadn't dealt with. And so I was.
You
able
mean
to
like
address
hip
all that.
pain? Why people get hip pain?
Yeah.
I've also read that
studied
too.
that,
Like
yeah.
when I was going through cancer too, like why people get cancer, they feel like, stagnant, or there's things they're holding on to. It is that's like a whole other, that's like spiritual healing.
Yeah, for sure. And so understanding that was like, wow, okay, well, let's heal a lot of this. And ever since I've gotten back, I feel like I move lighter. I have a different outlook on life, and the way I approach things when I'm faced with different challenges. I look at everything in a different lens now.
In those dark times, did like journaling ever help you, talking about it? Like what was it? If you couldn't do movement, what was it that helped you kind of work through those emotions?
It was a number of things. It was meditation, it was journaling, it was prayer, it was conversations with my life coach. It was also real conversations that I hadn't had with certain people in my life. So it was a number of different things that helped. I even did hypnotherapy.
Really?
I did.
How is that?
It was wild. My life coach had suggested it, and I was like,
wait, does it actually work? How did they count you down? And
so it was all on Zoom too.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was wild. But it worked. I had a lot of.
What do they do?
So she counts you down.
Okay.
And then she starts talking in a way.
Yeah.
That somehow.
The trance.
Yeah, puts you in like a really relaxed state.
And you never feel it come over you?
You do. It's wild. And it was super healing. And there are things that I remember. And they send you a video of it after. So you can always go back and rewatch it.
Wait, that's kind of eerie.
Yeah. But I had a lot of like daddy issue stuff that I've been holding on to. And so all that stuff came out in that process. So, like
you
I
just
said,
kind of felt like a calmness to kind of bring it out, or at least
bring it all out and
about it.
see it.
Yeah.
She would ask you questions that would bring you back to when you were a little girl and how you felt in those moments, and like what would you say if you had the confidence to say it in those moments. So you're getting a lot of that stuff out that you probably didn't get out as a kid.
Yeah.
It was wild.
Your dad wasn't around?
No. I mean, he is around. He's still here. But we just never really had a close relationship.
Yeah.
And, I struggled with that, and I carried that into a lot of different relationships since then, and so when I finally said, you know what, I want this cycle to end, I knew I had to heal that.
Childhood trauma is so real.
It's so real. So real. And you carry it. You don't even realize it's carried in relationships, but it's also carried in the way you show up in the world. I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome, or feeling like I wasn't enough or lacking something, but it all had stemmed back to, feeling like I always had to impress or do something to get love from my father, when in reality it had nothing to do with that. I was already enough, and I had to really start to believe that and unpack those stories I was really telling in my head.
Well, you've had a year.
Yeah.
You've had a year.
Tell me about it.
Oh my gosh. So at this point, are you already training for the New York City Marathon? Because, I mean, where does the marathon come into play?
Yeah, it's wild. So I set out to run a half marathon, had hip surgery, and then I was like, once I finally got back to Peloton, I said, you know what? I really want to be able to prove to myself and to my body that we're good, that we're good. And so I signed up for the New York City half again.
Okay.
I was like, okay, this is, I said I was going to do it. I'm a woman of my word. Let's go do this thing. And so I started training for the half marathon.
Okay.
And even in those moments, like running 9 miles, 10 miles, like those were big miles for me, someone that's not a runner.
Yep.
And so when the day came and I ran the half, I was like, wow, that was hard but amazing. It was a beautiful experience. The Peloton community supported me in it. It was like my big moment. And I was good with it. And then the hospital that did my surgery was like, we'd love to tell your story, but also we have a question for you. Would you ever consider running the full? And at the time, it was like a week after I had just ran the half. And I'm like, that's doing what I just did and then turn around and go back.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. Let me have some conversations. So I talked with a couple of my coworkers about it. Obviously talked to my doctor about it.
How did your hips feel after?
Hip felt completely fine.
Okay.
Completely fine.
That's great.
Yeah.
Were there any parts of the half that, like, you know, it was tweaking or anything like that?
Nothing with my hip. Yes, you know, typical runner soreness, you know, cramping in the legs, you know, a little bit of that, but nothing with my hip. And so that made me think, like, you know what? Maybe I could do this. Could I do this? Do I want to do this?
Yeah.
Why do I want to do this?
Right.
And so it was a lot of conversations with myself, a lot of getting clearance from my doctors, talking to Peloton about it, getting them on board, and then saying, you know what, I told Peloton, I said, I promise you, if anything starts to feel off with my hip, I'm done.
Yeah.
But I did it. And, you know, I talked to my running coach. He was like, this is not going to be easy, but I'm willing to go there with you if you want to. And then my PT committed to actually running it with me.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we ran.
Oh, and I when I ran for the first time, I was actually kind of nervous, and the whole process was kind of scary, like what to expect when you're running arguably one of the hardest marathons in the world. New York City Marathon. Every bridge is a hill.
Yes.
Like
every single one.
And it's good. I had a bunch of Fox people who were running with me, and I felt so supported.
Yes.
And that was huge. So to run with someone takes a big pressure off of you.
Yeah, for sure. And I knew, like, we were in it together. We did a lot of our training. We didn't run together during training as much, but every week we're like, all right, we're going to do 10 today. We're going to do 12 today. We got 16, you know. So we were really locked in.
What was the furthest that you run prior to the marathon in your training?
Yeah, in my training, the furthest I went was 20 miles.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you can do 20, you can do 26.
Yes.
Because
that's what they told me.
Yeah, because
they're like, if you do 20, you're ready. And
right.
I was like, yeah, I still got 6 more to go after that. But, you know, after doing the 20, I was like, okay, we're doing this thing. And it felt great. I actually did. I live in New Jersey, but I did the 20-miler here in New York.
Okay.
So I practiced the Queensboro and, you know, ran, you know, Manhattan through the park and all of that. So I felt really prepared for the marathon.
So then I remember I texted you where your billboard went up. And
Wild.
I remember walking and I'm like, oh, I know her, Kirsten. Oh my gosh. And then I texted you.
Yeah.
I was excited to see you. And then I was like, whoa, that's going to be a big moment when she's running down First Ave and she sees that billboard.
I kind of get emotional every time I think about it because it was at the moment where we had just finished the Queensboro Bridge, you know, and I think every runner that runs the New York City Marathon is preparing themselves mentally until you get to that point. And then you're on it and you're like, okay, we're in it. We're in it. And it's quiet and you're with your thoughts. And I had put a gospel song to come on right during that moment. And it was exactly what I needed. And then the bridge starts shaking because you can hear the roar of New York City when you get to the other side. And so you come down and you're just like, wow, I did that. Wow, I'm really doing this. I'm really running a marathon. And then I look up and it's that billboard of me. And that was the first moment I cried. I cried a lot throughout the marathon. That was the first moment I cried because it was in that moment, symbolically, it was like, don't you dare start doubting yourself. Look how far you've come. because it literally says on the billboard from hip surgery to the New York City Marathon. Oof. And so it was just a reminder of don't you dare doubt yourself. You're prepared for this. You've been through harder. Mm-hmm. Keep going. And so it was pretty emotional.
And I'm sure it just like, you've probably felt so validating, like I did that. It was all me. Mm-hmm. Like you're doing it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure. In that moment, absolutely. Absolutely. I was like, wow, look how far you've come, girl. Like that was hard. That would take a lot of people out, but not mm-hmm. you. But also like I was so open in sharing my story of recovery because I know, running is tough on the body. And mm-hmm. I know a lot of our members could be walking through injuries. And I want people to know it's not, well, you never can run again. No, you can. You can mm-hmm. do this. And I wanted people to see that.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I wanted my daughters to see it too.
Where were they along the route?
They were at the finish line.
Were they?
And I'm so happy they were. I'm so happy they were because, as we were talking, like anything after 20 miles was the longest I've ever done, right?
Right.
And so after getting to mile 20, things got really challenging for me. Mm-hmm. I started to become a walk run versus mm-hmm, a run mm-hmm. or walk jog.
Yeah.
Y'all admit that. And, the cramping started. The gels were starting to make me a little nauseous.
Right.
And so literally Peloton members, they were like out there cheering. Mm-hmm. And two of them, I'll never forget them. They could tell I was starting to struggle and they started running with me. Like literally
they got in and started running.
They got in and started running with me.
That's a great moment.
They could tell like I was struggling mm-hmm. and I was like, I cannot take any more gels. They started screaming around. Anybody have a banana? We need a banana.
Yeah.
We need a banana. And like, that's the beauty of New York. Like, I wish the world was always like the day it is mm-hmm. here in New York for a New York City Marathon because it's just so beautiful. People from all different walks of life, different beliefs, different backgrounds, different thought processes, all just with the same common goal of like moving and getting to the finish line.
I believe it's the greatest day in the city.
It literally is. So somebody gave me a banana and that saved my life. So whoever gave me that banana, I appreciate you. And, so things were getting hard. Things were getting hard. Yeah, I even went to the medical tent. I think it was like mile 24, 25.
Yeah.
And people were getting worried because they're tracking me
mm-hmm.
and then it shows that I stopped.
Yes.
And so I gave everybody a little bit of a heart attack
so
at that
close
point.
to the end.
You're so close. They're like,
2
please
miles
no,
left.
Kirsten. Like,
yeah.
But the thing that kept me going was knowing that my daughters were at the finish line. And so I kept going. And I get to the finish line and I cross and I'm like, wow, I just did that. And I look up and my daughters are at the finish line holding up signs. And I get to them and I'm now at this point bawling. And I look at my youngest daughter, Emery, and she has the medal in her hand, and she puts it around my neck.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. That is a moment.
Yeah. I get emotional thinking about it. Like, it was truly, 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 truly special.
How was your hip during this time? Was it okay?
Hip was fine the entire time.
That's
the
amazing.
Entire time. Nothing hurt in my hip.
Yeah.
Nothing hurt in my hip. My hamstrings, that... And then just my stomach, towards the end, I just started to feel really nauseous. Like my body was like, okay, I think we're done. I would like to stop now.
How was the recovery like after the marathon?
It actually wasn't bad. I was pretty surprised. It was about 2 days of walking like a robot and going downstairs backwards. And then I was fine.
What do you think? You're going to do another marathon?
What's so interesting? Everyone always asks that, like right after, and you're like, heck no. I love the idea of the half marathon distance. Mm-hmm. It's just enough. It's challenging enough. So they just came out with this thing called the Super Six, which is you do 6 marathons kind of all around the world, half marathons all around the world, and you get like the major medal like you do for the Abbott World Majors. And I'm like, how cool would that be?
What are the halves?
So I think one's in Prague, Copenhagen, Berlin, Valencia. There's one more I'm missing. There are two more I'm
Is
missing.
New York City in it?
New York?
too?
No, it's
No.
all European countries.
Okay.
And so I'm like, well, that would be fun.
That would be really fun.
Yeah.
It's completely attainable. You can do half
You can do it,
marathon.
and then you get to
Yeah.
explore the country and
Yes.
eat different foods, and
Yeah.
you're able to move around, So I love the half distance, and I think that is more my speed.
Mm-hmm.
Will I ever run another one? Maybe.
Yeah.
Something I keep telling members, I think a lot of times you go through a major accomplishment, and then it's like, all right, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no.
Don't you feel like you
I would like to
high?
stay in this.
Yeah.
I would
yeah.
like to celebrate this. I worked months for this. I just did something that I never thought in a million years I would do, and I did it. I joked. I was like, I'm wearing this medal for a month. They're like, Medal Monday. I'm like, no, Medal Month. Okay. And I did. I brought it to class every week. Like,
Good.
I sure did, because I think there's power in celebrating your accomplishments. A lot of people are like, all right, check done. Let's move on to the next. It's like, no, like, let's celebrate this.
If there's anyone out there thinking, they've got an injury or they've never run before or there's some kind of mental obstacle that they have, what's one piece of advice you give them to kind of get over it?
I don't know if you ever like really get over it. I say, try. I think a lot of people believe the lies that they've been telling themselves that they're not capable of something instead of just being like, you know what? I'm going to try. It's like fear of it not being perfect. Mm-hmm. And I think with running, there is no perfect one-size-fits-all runner. And I really want people to see that and understand it and really believing that. And so anybody, I think, that's going through an injury or, dipping with the idea of running is like, try it. And try it progressively. I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a runner. I'm going to go out, and I just ran fast, and then I quit. Well, it's because you didn't do it progressively. Like, there's nothing, like, I love a walk plus run. Those are one of my favorite classes to teach because a little bit of running, a little bit of walking, and you progressively get there, where the walking time starts to, get shorter and shorter, and your run times get longer and longer. And then all of a sudden you're running miles.
Yeah.
It's wild, but it's like you got to trust the process. Every day is not going to be perfect, but you got to just keep showing up.
Well, I think that you completely embody this idea of showing up as your authentic self. That really resonated me with what you said about just like a runner, there's stereotypes of what a runner should be or how should they look or what pace and everything you said. And I resonate with that because I never really wanted to run. It's something I wanted to do, but I didn't think I could do it.
Right.
Because I didn't fit the mold. I'm like, well, I don't look like that.
Yeah.
And I don't run like that. Right. But then I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And I made it look like the way I run it.
The way you should run it. Yeah. And I think that was a beautiful thing, even if you're considering running at all, like go out to a marathon and watch. Just watch, be a spectator. And you will see people from all different age demographics, size, shapes, colors running. And you're like, oh wait, I can fit in this mold too. Like I can go out there right now, You see people in wheelchairs in the marathon. Like I was so inspired by the people that surrounded me on that day. And so, if you're considering it, definitely go out to a race and just watch. And I promise you won't doubt yourself.
Well, Kirsten Ferguson, thank you so much for joining me. You are just so inspirational, and I really appreciate you sharing your story.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.